Okay, so today we're going to be talking about meiosis. Last time we were talking about mitosis. And they sound really, really similar, and some similar things are happening in the cell during these processes, but it's very important to draw a very bright line in your mind. It's very important to understand that there is a distinction between these two. Mitosis was for duplicating cells, right? It was for if you needed to repair, it's for if you need to grow. Meiosis, on the other hand, is just for making sex cells. It's just for making gametes. And we're going to talk about why we're doing that in the next couple of lectures. Reduction, division, genetic recombination. We'll talk about what that all means. So meiosis, we are making gametes. That is all. Gametes are the same thing as sperm and eggs in humans, and you can think of them that way for our purposes, okay? So gametes are sperm and eggs. All we're doing in meiosis is making sperm and eggs, full stop, period. That's all we're doing, okay? If you were to take like any random cell, like let's take this cell on my arm right here. This particular cell, that one right there, is diploid. I got one set of chromosomes from my mom. I got one set of chromosomes from my dad. You put them together, you get a diploid cell. If we were to look at a gamete, if we were to look at a sperm or an egg, that particular cell would be haploid. You can think of it as half-loid. It has half the genetic information. It's a dumb little trick, but that's what I think like every single time I'm thinking about haploid and diploid is haploid. It has half the genetic information. The kinds of cells in your body really that are haploid should really only be sperm or eggs. Okay, those have half of the genetic information. And the reason that we're doing that, and we'll talk about this later, is to drive diversity. You take half of your dad's genes, you take half your mom's genes, you put them together, and you get you. Okay, and we'll talk about the genetics of that maybe later in this section, maybe later on in the semester. But we have meiosis 1 happening, and we have meiosis 2 happening. And in mitosis, you only have mitosis, right? In meiosis, you have two separate stages of cellular division. And again, all we're doing is making a sperm or an egg that has half of the genetic information. And this process is only happening in your testes or in your ovaries, whereas mitosis is kind of happening throughout your body all the time. So meiosis only happens in gonads, and we are making haploid cells. Let's talk briefly about the process of spermatogenesis, or the creation of sperm. It is slightly different than oogenesis, or the creation of eggs, and so we're going to talk briefly about each of them. So in spermatogenesis, you start out with a cell somewhere within your testes. And this is this a haploid or is this a diploid cell? Well, it says it right here. It's a diploid cell. It has both copies of your chromosomes. And what we're going to do is we're going to put that through meiosis 1, which is going to make these cells. So this says 2n equals 46, and what that means is you and I have 46 chromosomes, as discussed in our previous lecture. If you have a gamete, it has 23 chromosomes, okay? And so this is written n equals 23. I'm not necessarily worried about the terminology of n and 2n, but you should know gametes have half the genetic information. Gametes in humans have 23 chromosomes, okay? Then we put it through the process of meiosis 2, and we wind up with 4 cells. So you start with 1 cell, and at the end you wind up with 4 gamete cells. 1 diploid cell gives you 4 haploid cells. The process of oogenesis is a little bit different. So you start out with a diploid cell. You put it through meiosis 1, making these cells haploid, right? Half the genetic information. But then, after meiosis 2, you only wind up with 1 gamete. You only wind up with 1 egg, and you wind up with 3 of what are referred to as polar bodies. These cells die. They don't make it but you wind up with this one egg cell. And I just wanted to point out there that the process of spermatogenesis and the process of oogenesis slightly different. Okay, they're undergoing the same meiosis, but you wind up with different results at the end. So let's talk about the specifics of meiosis. I think actually we'll talk about the specifics of meiosis in the next lecture. But what you should have figured out from this one is that meiosis and mitosis, very different processes, and you should know why they're different. What kind of cells do you wind up with at the end of each? You should kind of understand what haploid is and what diploid is as well. And you should know that spermatogenesis is different than oogenesis. Creating a sperm is different from creating an egg.